And so time to start the actual painting. So all the undersides on this are just Mr. Colour 308 FS36375, which is light ghost grey. As you can see, no primer used here. The kit doesn't really require it, just a wipe over with some alcohol to clean the surface. And no marbling, basing, anything like that. All I'm doing in the first instance is getting a good opaque coat of the base colour in place. Quite heavily thinned paint, but it is quite dense in terms of its pigmentation, so it covers, as you can see there, it's going over light grey anyway, so it's covering well. And it's just working over the entire lower surfaces. And I do it zone by zone, so as you can see here, I'm doing one of the engine pods, and I'll switch to the next engine pod, and I'll do the central fuselage bit, and it's just angling the airbrush at all times to try and avoid, if you can, any of the vortexes or anything that create sort of grainy finishes. So just doing the central tunnel there now, and then the nose, and this is just setting up the paint for the weathering process, which will come next. Well, hello, it's future me, and this is just a little note to say that this was intended to be the start of the painting process and painting the underside, but I changed my camera angle hoping to get a better angle on what I was doing, and as you can see, the net result of that is my big fat head in the way throughout this. So basically the rest of the painting is pretty much the same as this, so I'm going to not include any of this footage past this little bit to show you the problem, and just to reassure you that the methods I'm using here I will explain in the next few minutes on other parts of the spraying, because it's all exactly the same. So apologies for that, but I think it's important when you get it wrong, just to let people know what the what the result was of getting it wrong. The result here being my big fat head. So moving along. So with the clown shoes out of the way, we're switching to Mr. Colour 307, which is dark ghost grey. Nothing special here, it's thinned with a bit of Mr. Colour thinner, just a standard thinner, and this is just about getting an even opaque base coat to start the weathering process on. So we're not worried about following in the direction of airflow or any kind of marbling or weathering or anything like that. This is literally just exactly what it says. It's just a base coat, but a base coat of the correct colour to work from. So odd little division line on some of these tactical paint scheme Tomcats. You can see I've masked the 36375 on the underside of the forward fuselage there to apply this 36320 side shade. And then once that's all in place, all I'm doing is switching to Mr. Colour White. I think this is 156 Super White, is it? But it's just quite heavily thin, and I'm just using it to build up sort of a weathering patchy effect on panel lines and in detail and stuff over all of the previously dark ghost grey painted surfaces. Doesn't have to be exact, it doesn't have to be precise or anything like that. It's all going to be blended back later on with the base colour. And then what we're doing here is switching to a dark grey. I think this is 36118, which is gunship grey. and that's just to paint along some of the panel detail and some random other details on the surface, just to give it a darker effect in some places. You could use black here, but I'm using grey because it means it'll minimise the amount of overspraying I have to do later to blend it in. Again, completely random, just pick out details and paint them. So this is giving a very patchy effect to the base colour, which is what we want. It's setting the scene, if you will. And then finally, what I did was I loaded the airbrush with number 101, Mr. Colour 101, which is smoke grey. And I'm just using spatter masks here, which have been cut up into little sections. I'm just randomly applying a kind of a spatter effect of that grey smoke over all of these painted areas. It depends on how the mask goes down, whether it's a hard or a soft edge, but it really doesn't matter. Just picking up various bits, as you can see, and just altering the orientation and the distance and all that kind of stuff, and just basically randomly spraying bits and bobs of these masks with the grey smoke colour. And then what we're doing is I've gone back to the base 36320, which is Mr. Colour 307, and I'm just spraying that over all these effects just to blend them all back into the surface. And what I'm looking to end up with is a slightly weathered, variegated finish. On film and in photos, it doesn't look that obvious when it's done, but it is definitely there. And I really don't like that overdone effect, in spite of how worn TPS schemes could be on US Navy aircraft, especially in this time period. I would still rather go with less than more. You can always add more subsequently. And then just peeling away that little bit of blue tack masking there to reveal the difference between the 36375 and 36320 areas, and that's set us up for doing the top side, which is a darker blue grey. 35237 is that particular colour. Okay, so moving to the main topside colour, H337, which is 35237. As before, this is just getting a really good basic base coat of the colour to work from. Just getting it nice and opaque. Well, this literally takes a couple of minutes on an aircraft on a model of this size. You see all the masking there that's been done to separate the colours. Some of it are blue tack, some of it's hard masked. But you can see how quickly and well that paint goes down. Mr. Colour is just, I always default back to it. And then we're going in with the whites and doing a sort of pattern in several directions over the surface. I work in one direction up individual panel lines and into details and stuff. And then it's going sort of at 90 degrees, although you can vary that, there's no need to stick with that, but then it's going at the other angle over the same areas. And that's just a really quick, efficient way of getting a very marbled effect on your paint scheme. In my experience, so much quicker than black basing or anything like that. You know, the entire white application took maybe 15 minutes for this model. So you're working over the main fuselage there. And sometimes you'll go over 2 panels in one, sometimes you'll miss a panel, sometimes you'll just do 1 panel at a time. Sometimes you'll go over the division line, sometimes you'll avoid it, and you'll go heavier in some areas, just like this. It's just getting a really random look to the marbled effect. Before switching to a dark grey, in this case it's gunship grey, and then going over some of the detail and streaking some of this in the direction of the airflow. Again, working in both directions, but more generally with the airflow, with the darker grey. And you can see how it's really given this variegated finish to the main colour at this point. Really breaking that surface up. And then finally it's using a spatter mask with some of that clear smoke colour, and just randomly going over the colours that you've so far applied. Different sort of spraying it heavier in some areas, lighter in others, continually changing the orientation of your mask and stuff to get this kind of finish. You can see me picking different parts of the mask there, moving it round, spinning it, just making sure it's as random as it can possibly be at this point. And then you switch back to the base 35237 colour, and you're just spraying it, misting it over to blend all of these colours in and knock them back and soften all the edges to give this kind of mottled, weathered effect. Obviously you don't want to go too heavy with this, or you'll eradicate, you'll completely cover over your previous work, so you don't want to go too heavy, but you do need to make it look like it's just weathered paint rather than stuff you've airbrushed, if that makes sense. But really the application of all of these topside colours took maybe, I don't know, less than 30 minutes in one session to do this. Again, you're harnessing the quick drying nature of the paints. And then we'll pull all the masking off of that. So this is the same method that was done for all 3 colours here. Pull off the masking, like so, and then look at the result. And we're basically ready to move on to some of the other. And so with the main camouflage applied, it's time to do the minor details, things like the walkways here on top of the intakes. Nothing special, just following the instructions, masking it out with strips of masking tape. There are decals included for this, but I always think this sort of thing is better masked than sprayed. Wherever possible, mask and spray your paints is pretty much my mantra. So yeah, fairly simple job to mask these out. And then it's just, if you look at pictures, this is a variation of it. It's a rough grey, sort of black grey paint. I think it goes on black initially, but weathers very quickly. So this is just a mix of various dark greys and some blacks, just lightly sprayed over these areas. And then remove the masking tape. It's really that simple. It's sort of like a 15-20 minute job to get this sort of result. And then it's just moving around the model, doing all of these little bits, the wing bags, the inflatable bags and stuff like that, and all the other details. And so continuing the detail painting, it's all the areas, all the bays and stuff that have to be white. This is the refueling probe bay here. And also on the port side of the fuselage, you'll see me doing in a second. This is the boarding ladder recesses. It's just quickly masking those off and spraying them with gloss white. you'll see that the masking tape has removed a bit from that metallic piece that goes over the rear boarding ladder or boarding step. The paint doesn't adhere to that very well, so it'll need a little bit of touch up. And then it's just things like the undercarriage doors. The insides of those are being painted gloss white as well. The outsides have already been painted, and that will just allow me to go in and do the red edges on that US Navy aircraft have. So just working over the model, doing all these little details now. So with all the details painted, or most of them anyway, what I like to do is give a coat of gloss varnish just to protect it. In this case it's GX112, which is the UV cut gloss from Mr. Colour. And it's very, very heavily thinned. It's probably 80-85% thinned. So if it looks like I'm flooding this on, that's because I pretty much am. But what you have to bear in mind is that probably over 90% of what I'm applying is gonna flash off and evaporate. There's going to be very little of the actual varnish left on the surface. So if it looks like it's flooding the detail, it isn't, because most of that's going to evaporate very, very quickly. And the point of this isn't to give a high gloss finish. It's just mainly to protect the paint from further weathering operations and the like. And it also gives a smoother surface when you come to apply the decals. Just makes the decals easier to apply, less hassle, and obviously helps avoid silvering to some degree, along with setting and softening solutions and the like. But yeah, it's at this stage I like to do this, then apply the wash, then the decals. So yeah, this is just a light gloss coat. Make it a bit shinier, it'll all get polished up. And then once this is out of the way, there's a few other details to apply. The metallic areas still need to be done, but I like to do that after I've applied this protective coat, so I can minimise the amount of coats that go over the metallic. And then this will just be put aside for a day or so to let that varnish harden off, and then we'll go back and see where we are. So as part of the detail painting, all the edges of the undercarriage doors need to be painted red, and for this I thought I'd try the AK marker pens. I'm using Signal Red here, and it's quite a firm edge or tip, and it makes it quite easy to just go around the edges, as you can see here, gently marking in the red edge of the door. And if there's any excess after it's dried, the acrylic isn't that hardy, so it's fairly easy to remove the excess just using like a piece of a cocktail stick or something like that you see here, almost in view, and just rubbing it along the edge where you want the paint to be removed, and that's all that's required for that. And it really made what can be quite an onerous job. I've masked and tried all sorts of things in the past to do this, and this made it really very easy and absolutely good enough for what I require on this model. Sometimes the simplest methods are the best. And so it's time to paint the metal areas on the exterior of the airframe. For this I'm using Mr. Colour Super Iron 2, which is a nice bright when thinned with Mr. Colour Rapid Thinner, but still reasonably dark metal, which I thought was a pretty good look on this. As previously said, this is going over the initial coat of gloss varnish. And what I don't want to do is have too many coats over the external metallic areas to too badly affect the finish. And then with the masking removed, you can see the immediate result we've got. And then it's just repeating the process using the same dark iron 2 over things like the gun panel here. Again, as before, immediately removing the masking. It's just the way I like to work when I'm spraying metallics. And that immediately reveals the cannon or the gun panel there. And then the two vents on top of the fuselage behind the cockpit, both masked off. As you can see, multiple bits of masking tape and filled in with liquid mask. No, this is all the work of minutes, but it's all the little detail bits that you need to do. And so it's time to put a wash on the model, and what I'm looking to make is a medium browny grey sort of wash. Normally I'd use quite a dark wash, but I want it to look quite dirty, I think, is the effect I'm looking for. And for that I want a warm brownish colour rather than a darker grey sort of tone that I would normally use. If you have MIGS colours, the oil brusher Starship Filth is pretty much exactly the right colour, but I found that you can the oil paint variant is a very different colour to the oil brusher variant and is not nearly as good. So I've taken to mixing my own, which, as you can see here, is just a mix of is those three colours. And so, having mixed those colours together, I'm now mixing them in with some low odour white spirit. And what I want to do is I want quite a thick mixture. This isn't going to be a pin wash as such. This is I do use sludge washes where I just cover the entire model quite often. I know a lot of people really dislike that, but it works for me. But in this instance, I'm going to use quite a thick mixture because I want it to actually properly grip into the detail. So it's quite a thick mixture, but that is pretty much exactly the colour I want for this tactical paint scheme aircraft. So just keep mixing the oil paint in with the thinner until I get this thick gloopy mixture that I'm looking for. Again, pretty much the same thickness as the oil brusher would be coming out of the bottle. And then we're just brushing it on and around all the detail. Working over the entire model, all the detail, all the rivets, just receiving this kind of coat of this thick gloopy oil paint. There's a load of rivets and stuff around that area there that particularly needed to be sort of shown up on the final finish, if you like. And like I say, this thick mixture will go into the panel detail, and what I want it to do is actually properly grip into the detail. Like I said, I actually want this to be quite visible. I find that pin washes tend to hang up and don't flow around very well. So I've long been an advocate in my own modelling of using sort of more sludgy washes and thicker paints for the washes. I do use pin washes for specific details here and there, but I like a wash on my models to highlight detail. And this is the method that I've refined over quite a lot of time to suit my to suit my finishing. It doesn't take too long. It's probably I find the entire process quicker than a pin wash, and the results, well, hopefully when this is done, the results will speak for themselves. So yeah, I work over the whole model. A model of this size, like the Tomcat, I don't need to divide this up. I'll work over the whole model in one go to do this. Just a little bit of a shot of the detail being washed on the fuselage here. But hopefully you can see that although it seems quite messy at the moment, it's also very quick and a very easy way of doing this. There's no special techniques being used here, just slopping it on. And so probably 25-30 minutes to get this all done. And now we're ready to basically, as you've applied this, the thinner has been flashing off and leaving just the oil paint. And we're basically ready to start removing the excess. I will start with bits of this blue towel, and you'll go through sort of quite a lot of this in the initial stages, but it's literally just wiping away the excess. You're going to get quite messy on your hands and stuff, but keep working at it and keep using fresh bits and working in and around. Not going with the airflow or anything like that. This is literally just an initial operation to get rid of as much of the excess as possible. Using, like I say, you'll be changing and throwing away this this blue towel quite often, but you're getting rid of sort of 95% of the excess oil paint initially. So as you're working over these, just make sure that you don't remove any of the detail. You have to be quite careful around some of the details like aerials and stuff. I did remove the pitot accidentally, which I should have known better, but there we go. And eventually you end up with sort of 99% maybe of the excess paint removed. And at this point we're going to switch to cotton buds to get into all the corners and nooks and crannies to remove that detail. So there's my little box of cotton buds there. And again, as with the tissue, you're going to go through a lot of cotton buds doing this, and it's just getting into all those little corners and angles and stuff and making sure all the excess is removed. And you'll keep going back over the model and spotting bits that you've missed, and you just need to keep doing this. I buy these cotton buds in sort of multiple hundreds at a time from sort of Tamiya or AliExpress. Yeah, especially on areas like these little strakes and stuff, and in details like that. You don't want too much of a build-up of paint in those areas. So I think I probably went through 25 or 30 cotton buds on this model alone doing this. If it comes loaded with oil paint, just throw it away and start with a fresh one. And sometimes you'll find that using the cotton buds dislodges oil paint and gives you a build up. Don't be afraid to go back and use some more of the blue towel or whatever towel, kitchen towel, whatever you're using, and you're sort of removing any of the excess that you've sort of dislodged almost, and also giving the surface a slight polish. So it's not linear. You're not going from one process to the other in exclusion. You can go back and like use a previous process like here, going back to using a little bit of the blue paper to polish some of it up, and also you might find that there's an area where the oil paint hasn't gone into the detail, so don't hesitate to go back and touch them in with a paintbrush and redo an area. There's no hard and fast rules when you're doing these sorts of washes. And one thing you might find you have to do is dip a cotton bud in a little bit of the low odor thinner, like with this cotton bud here, to get into some really tight corners and sort of remove some particularly recalcitrant oil wash that's really embedded into corners. Just lightly moisten the cotton bud with low odour thinner, and that'll lift that paint straight off. You can see that loading up there, but it's looking quite thin on the actual cotton bud. That's because the thinner is diluting it as it comes up into the cotton bud. So again, mix and match your techniques. So when we've actually got just about everything I think I can out, one of the final stages I like to do is use a bit of melamine block. Melamine is kind of a plastic foam. I think it's sold under things like Magic Sponge and stuff like that, but it's very, very slightly abrasive. And I use it to polish the surface when I'm finished, and you can actually see that it's still lifting oil paint off of the surface, but it's also giving it a slight polish. So I like to work all of the surfaces over with a melamine block. You can get this, you can buy this really cheaply for lots of it on eBay and places like that, and it's become a pretty regular part of my finishing process over the years. Because of its slightly abrasive polishing qualities and the way it lifts off paint that has kind of resisted everything else, this tends to work. Again, working over all the surfaces with the melamine block. And it's very flexible. It will actually go down into nooks and crannies, but it's also quite fragile. What you'll find is it'll break up and it'll create kind of a really fine sort of dust as you're doing this. It will just wash away very easily. It's not a massive issue at all. But again, and it just adds a little bit of extra sheen to the surface that's already been glossed, and I find all the glossing and oil paint and this sort of polishing process does actually shine it up quite a bit, and that all helps when you're coming to apply the decals, which is the next step. So one very final thing I did notice was that some areas of the division between the flaps and the spoilers on the upper surface were retaining some oil paint that I really didn't want in there because of the angles and stuff involved. So I'm just using another cotton bud just as a little final hurrah here, just to remove that excess oil paint. It's been moistened slightly with low odour thinner, and it's just digging those final last little bits out. We can pop the model together there and zoom it round the circuit. And there's our model, washed, all the excess removed, and we're basically ready for decals now. I think it's looking rather nice at this point. I'm very pleased with how it's coming along. And so to decal application, this is obviously the kit decals. I'm doing a build for the importer. Tamiya decals have got a reputation. I've always found them fine. They perform well, they apply well, and under a coat of sort of flat or satin they become more or less invisible. So I tend to find that people's talk about them being thick and unusable and stuff is largely hyperbole. But as you can see here, just being put on, just soaked in water, cold water for a while, put on, and then cotton buds and various pieces of tissue and stuff used to remove all the excess moisture and sort of and pat them down into the surface detail. Absolutely nothing special. No special tools or anything used here. Now these scuff marks I think are a great idea. They're a little bit pixelated, and to be fair, on this model they're not even going to be visible because I'm going to have the wings swept back, but it's nice to put them on and give that effect. Take a bit of lining up to get there, and you need to sort of take some care when you're sort of removing all the excess moisture and stuff and packing them down into detail, that you don't move them. But really, a really nice idea, I think, overall. I've used them on the 48 scale kits. They're included in this kit. Um, they will use some extra sort of weathering effects with oils over the top of it just to blend it a bit better. But as a starting point, I think they're really cool. I really like them. Just making sure I get them into all that. There's some raised detail on the wings there. And then this is just Tamiya's Mark Fit Extra Strong or Super, which isn't available in the UK. I've had to order it from abroad, but it is it's really good with especially with Tamiya's decals. Um, and just going around the edge of the film there, making sure it conforms. And that's it really. It's just working over the surface of the model, following the instructions, and adding these decals, getting them into place. Removing all the excess moisture and stuff, and then applying that Mark Fit or whichever decal solutions you prefer to use. I would say, especially with Japanese style decals, do a test if you're using something that isn't designed specifically for them, like the Mr. Or the GSI solutions or the Tamiya Mark Fit solutions. If you're using something that isn't designed specifically for the decals, always do a test, just to make sure you don't ruin the decals. Particularly like the way the black decals, as I think they should be, on this decal sheet are actually a very dark grey, which matches a kind of dark grey like the tyre black I used for the fin tips and stuff. So really nice little touch by Tamiya. And then after sort of half an hour or so, they've settled enough in that you can see where they haven't settled in completely, and I'm just using a fresh number 11 blade here to cut along panel lines and flap hinge lines and stuff. And then I'm just using a bit more of that Mark Fit Super on a paintbrush there, and just sort of tapping it into the panel detail and the hinge lines and stuff to get the decal right down in there. And I might do this a couple of times over the next day or so. Then sort of here we are about a day later, and all I'm going to do is go over the decals with some Trizact, wet sanding the decals. This kind of breaks the varnish on the surface, which makes subsequent coats of varnish really bite into the decal nicely. Obviously you have to be a little bit careful because you are sort of wet sanding a water slide decal, so generally speaking, stuff like Tamiya decals adhere really well, so this is not the slightest problem, but it's just making sure it really smooths those decals out, and then you might have to cut and add a bit more softening fluid if this process shows that some of the decal hasn't settled yet completely into the detail. You can slit the decal and add a bit more of the decal solution to it. But as you can see, decals adhere well, no problems. And then the final thing I'm doing here as a decal preparation, or for the final finish, this is a coat of GX112 clear, but it's about 95% thinned with Mr. Colour Leveling Thinner. The Mr. Colour Leveling Thinner delays the flashing off, and the varnish also helps to delay the thinner flashing off, if you like. And what that does is acts as a final softening to the decal. So any little areas that you might have a tiny little, the merest hint of any silvering or something, that will just completely sort of almost dissolve the varnish of the decal and pull it right down into the surface of the model. It's something I've been doing for quite a few years, and I find it really helps with the final finish, and helps the decals actually look like they're painted on. But very liberal coat. Again, as I've said before with these varnishes, nearly everything you spray on is going to flash off and evaporate away, so no big deal. And so we're sort of moving on to the area where we're dealing with all the details now, as the kit is nearing sort of majorly complete. So it's things like spraying the wheels here. After I've sprayed this dark grey, they will get masked, and the hubs will be sprayed white. using the high Q circle masks. And then it's a case of using a wash. In this case I'm using Tamiya's dark grey wash, straight from the pot here. And it's just running it in and around all of the hub detail and the division line between the hub and the tyre and stuff. And you can see how good this wash is and how it really flows against the gloss white paint I'm using here. Just making sure you cover everything. And then a last little touch around the rim there. And then when that's dry, using a very lightly moistened cotton swab to remove all the excess from the highlights. It's just the work of seconds really, and just highlights all the detail nicely. And while we're here, I'm using this dark grey wash also to do some of the panels and vents and things, using the dark grey just because it gives it a bit of depth, and it also sort of highlights the difference just between this as a wash and the overall sort of dirtier, muddy, sort of brown grey wash for the general airframe. It just gives it a really nice bit of depth. So these vents here, and then these vents behind the cockpit. And yeah, once it's dry, it just gives a nice bit of depth. And the multi-stage of the exhausts here, where they've been sprayed with a dark sort of steel iron colour. Then the inside of the petals has been masked and sprayed with, again, a very dark grey. And then I'm just brush painting some darker sort of steel, some thin dark steel into those very small areas between the petals. You could sort of you could mask and spray this, but a very fine brush, and it will flow in there quite nicely. So this is where we start bringing sort of everything together on the model. You know, we're starting to get to the finishing stages now. And what I'm doing here is representing the bare metal on the oleos of the undercarriage legs, using some bare metal foil, just cutting a little strip and then burnishing it into place using a cocktail stick, because that will burnish the metal down to that plastic without actually damaging it, and will actually shine it up a little bit. It can be quite frustrating because until you get that bare metal foil burnished down, it won't really want to adhere all that well, and it can move around quite a lot. But once you've got enough of that burnished on to get a grip, it's not too bad, and then you can burnish it down like that. Try and get the join line, although once it's burnished down you can't really see the join, but try and put it somewhere sort of out of view, in this instance like that, behind the torque link. And then I'm just using, this is actually a black wash, and I'm using that to outline the details on that undercarriage leg, just to make them stand out a bit. I would have used a dark grey had I thought ahead, really, but a black doesn't look too bad, so I'll live with it. And the same to the main undercarriage that's all been assembled and is almost ready to put in place. Being a Tamiya kit, once you go to assemble all this into place, you'll find that it all fits pretty much perfectly. And just what I'm doing there is just putting some Tamiya extra thin onto the joining surfaces, and these will then just pop into place and lock into place. And you've got those locking arms that go onto the side of the air intakes, and it's just a case of popping it down and pushing it into place. Really not very difficult at all. And it's the same with the undercarriage doors. They're all very solid locations, and in fact all these undercarriage legs will go in place without glue. Just adding the glue just secures them. and then it's just popping the wheels in place again with a little bit of Tamiya extra thin. These are keyed, so careful if you flatten them to make sure that the flats will be in contact with the surface they're stood on. I will do that a little bit later, but these again, they're keyed. They slide on beautifully. They just plop straight into place. Absolutely no dramas with any of this whatsoever. And repeat as necessary for the nose undercarriage, although the nose undercarriage isn't keyed, but setting it down to see that everything's in place. Take 2 seconds to line everything up, and there she is, she stands. And then there's other details like the ladders and stuff to go on here, so I'm just again, I've touched all these in. I'm just adding a little sort of dab of Tamiya extra thin. You can use whatever cement you like, but these fit so well that little squeeze of Tamiya extra thin is all you need, and that will locate in place and be very, very secure when it's dry. So like I say, this is just these final, you know, we're on the home run, although there's still a ways to go, I will grant you. Just using that AK stick there, AK marker pen, red one, just to touch in some of the areas that got damaged while I was assembling the boarding ladders and stuff. And then all the decals have gone onto the ordnance I'm using now, so I'm just giving it a quick coat of VMS satin varnish. All of the weapons being given that coat just to flatten them all down. So all these kind of procedures go sort of, you know, hand in hand with the finishing. You're just sort of jumping around from bit to bit to bit for these finishing stages. Sometimes it helps to do a to-do list for these sorts of things, because then you know you can tick it off as you go and know that it's done, and you don't get lost. Like I say, that's VMS satin varnish, and then we're just going to varnish the entire model. As I've said plenty of times before, there's nothing sort of particularly complicated about this. You just get a nice wet coat on. This varnish isn't thinned at all, it's straight into the colour cup, and it's just a good solid wet coat. Not flooded on, but just sort of shy of flooding. And no matter how bad you think it looks, it will dry flat. Just walk away, leave it, don't worry about it, leave it for an hour or two, come back and look, and I can almost guarantee you'll be amazed at the finish you've got. But as it catches the light there, hopefully you can see how heavy this coat of varnish is. Then we'll work on the main fuselage. So this has to be done in sections, obviously, because we're doing the whole thing, and you need to be able to hold it, which is what that little 3D printed device there is, look, which will now go up into the jet pipe area and give me a little handhold. Utterly unnecessary. You can use a couple of paint brushes or something that I've used in the past, anything like that. But I have a 3D printer. I have this, you know, I have the ability to make these sorts of things. So a few minutes making it, or a few minutes designing it, and an hour to print it, and I've got this handhold to keep my hands away while I'm varnishing the model. And then we're stopping to peel all the, get rid of all the masking now. So that's the twin camera system under the nose. It's a camera in one side, television camera in one side, and an infrared detector in the other. And then we can take all the masking off of the canopy as well. Should say this Tomcat as a model, when it's at this stage, is just like the real thing. It is very, very sturdy. All the undercarriage and stuff is very, very sturdy. So it's not a delicate model in any way, apart from aerials and pitos and stuff to be careful of. Just going to give the inside of the canopy a little dry brush with some light grey to pick out the canopy locking mechanisms and stuff. Just a soft flat brush and some ammo of MIG dry brushing paints. This is the medium grey I'm using here, and it's just picking out, like I say, all that canopy locking mechanisms, and then you can remove the masking from the inside of the canopy and just give it a quick polish to make sure nothing's marking the canopy. So I've masked the navigation lights here, and they're all being sprayed with a chrome silver first. You can touch these in with a very fine brush. I chose to spray them. And then clear red and clear green where necessary to go over the chrome silver and give that kind of clear light appearance. And then remove the masking to reveal your lights. I did find it marked the surface a little bit, the masking fluid, so it required a little spray here with some VMS just to dull those surfaces back down a little bit. And this is the only time I'll ever mist VMS, is when I'm just blending some stuff in like this. Otherwise, always use it wet. So this is where we start the oil paint weathering. Again, using, yep, you've guessed it, Starship Filth, best colour on the planet. And all I'm doing is adding dots around the areas where the machine gets the most footfall during maintenance. So have a look at pictures and stuff to ascertain where the heaviest footfall is for maintenance. And then you're just blending those in with a lightly moistened brush and cotton buds and the like. Just working it backwards and forwards and gently working it in to blend it in along those areas where photos tell you it's most heavily weathered. And then going back again, once it's had the thinner's had a chance to flash off, just go back with another moistened brush again and do it again. So it's just working it over and over, and you can add multiple layers of this paint as it dries. Don't panic about if it looks like you removed too much. You can just let it dry, add some more and go again. Oil paint is so versatile and so easily blended. And then again on the rear fuselage here, I appreciate all of this is actually speeded up, because it would take, this is quite a long process, and I just wanted to compact it down so you can see what I'm doing. And if you run it at a quarter speed, it'll look normal. But yeah, this is just gently with a moist brush working it into the sort of satin finish. And some of these areas I gave a couple of applications of this. And also don't be afraid to use some different colours as well, some darker and lighter colours. But this just gives that impression of something that's had a heavy boots on it a lot during maintenance. And also for the wing sweep areas, the decals look great, but they are quite pixelated, so I just wanted to blend them in a little bit more. So this is a good coat of Starship Filth over those areas. And then a heavily moistened brush this time is used to remove all of the excess in line with the sweep, the radius of the sweep. And then tidy it up with a cotton bud, and that's it. Really simple stuff. And then we're running this part at normal speed, but I just wanted to show you, once it's all dry and all the thinner is flashed off, if you use a cotton bud just wipe it over in the direction of the airflow, and it just helps to blend it that little bit more and makes it look a little bit less spotty. You can see the excess that's still coming off onto the cotton bud there, but it's like that final step. And then when that's all dry, you can go back and apply more layers if you like. But I just like this final step with a fresh cotton bud just to blend it a little bit further. And then it's time to weather the undersides as well. This is, yep, you've guessed it, Starship Filth. This is the darker one from the actual tube. And this is just being dry brushed backwards from certain areas and vents and stuff like that. Again, look at references. They'll show you where these build-ups and accumulations happen. The Tomcat could get filthy on the underside, so don't be shy is my advice here, and enjoy yourself. So yeah, this is Starship Filth initially, just to get some of these vents and stuff blackened up. And then we're switching to a different colour here, believe it or not. This is actually a mixture of raw umber and yellow ochre. Tomcat engine nacelles got a lot of very sort of yellowy brown oil staining moving back from sort of just behind the undercarriage. So this is being applied slightly heavier. It's kind of like I don't know how to describe it really, a wet brush. It's kind of like dry brushing, but not as dry as you would usually use, in order to give a streaky, oily effect as well. And again, look at your references. You'll see that quite often these areas could be absolutely filthy on the Tomcat. So just keep working it until you're happy with the appearance you've got, really. But you can see it's a little bit wetter than a normal dry brush here, but it does still streak back nicely, as well as leaving quite a lot of excess and stuff, and then sort of some areas in the in the central tunnels as well. I haven't gone overboard here. This is about as quarter as filthy as some Tomcats appeared to get. So yeah, you can really have a ball here if you're of a weathering persuasion. I'm known for not being of a weathering persuasion, but sometimes like to have a little bit of fun anyway. And then at this point, just dropping the stores in place. So the tanks are on. I'm just dropping a couple of AIM 7M Sparrows into the central tunnel there. Just dabs of super glue, and they just drop straight into place without any trouble at all. And there's them both in place. So this is a 2-2-2 configuration, 2 Sparrows, 2 Phoenix, 2 Sidewinders. And then the wing pylons there, the kinked wing pylons there, with an AIM 54C Phoenix and an AIM 9M Sidewinder on each side. Again, just tiny dabs of super glue to put them in place. And so now the Tomcat has got all its stores in place as well. So I did actually lose this decal earlier on in the building of the model. It's the decal that represents the chaff and flare dispensers on the rear of the boat tail, which meant that when it turned up out of the blue, I had to then apply it, which meant applying it basically over the finished paint and weathering. It's not a problem as far as the actual decal's concerned. I don't mind it being sort of clean, but it did mean that I had to use quite a lot of pressing it down and Tamiya's Mark Fit Super Strong to get it to conform over the varnished unweathered surface, and it would then require a little drop of matte varnish when it was dry, just to blend it all in, just kind of pushing it down into the detail there with a cotton bud. Like I say, not the end of the world, but just one of those annoying little, I lost it and couldn't find it anywhere, and it just randomly turned up towards the end of the build. No big issue, just a little bit more softener being added there, and then when it's dry, a drop of varnish. Just touching in the fuel dump pipe there, the exit with the red marker pen, or the red paint pen from AK. And the inside of the exhausts have been painted matte white, and I'm just using Tamiya's weathering pastels with some pointed cocktail sticks here to work a little bit of weathering into the detail inside the burner cans. Not going overboard here. This will largely be unseen on the finished model in my instance, because it's going to live its life in a display cabinet at the importers. So as long as the detail's highlighted, I wasn't going to go too overboard with it. You can see it looks pretty effective. Just 10 or 15 minutes using that weathering pastel set. And then they get glued in place onto the previously applied donut panels, and it's just using a bit of Ammo of MIG Ultra glue around the inside of that donut panel, and the burner can itself will just locate quite positively in there. It is aligned. There is an alignment there which will make it snap in. And that was all that was required there. That's complete. And then one of the very last things was to deal with the pitot. I'd snapped the pitot previously, so I had to remove it, and I quickly designed a replacement in Fusion 360 and 3D printed some replacements which are available actually on Colts 3D. I put them up there. So it wasn't intended as an improvement, it's just to replace a part that I broke, just to be clear. And with the canopy actually properly located in place, it's not glued at this point, but it does locate pretty securely in place. And that is basically the model done. Now I may obviously go back to this over the next few days. I generally keep a model around the bench for a few days, just seeing if I spot anything that I've missed that needs touching in. But effectively the model is now finished. I'm just giving you a little look over it here. So fantastic model, hugely recommended. It's as good as the 48 scale one, I would say. And typically Tamiya, if something really goes wrong with it in terms of assembly, it's going to be your fault and not the kit's, basically, to be very blunt about it. You can see the swing wings do work, but I want mine to be swept most of the time. That's why I've built it this way. So yeah, that's the Tamiya 72nd scale F-14D. It does come clearly highly recommended, in case you hadn't gathered that. And thanks to everybody for tuning in to watch me build this over the last month or so, month and a half. I hope you picked up some tips. I hope you've enjoyed the actual build itself and watching it. And I will see you all very shortly for my next build, which is yet to be determined. I've got a few ideas, but stay tuned, and I will reveal all in due course. So thanks for tuning in. Be safe. Have a good Christmas, everybody. And I'll see you with the next project.